Namaskaram. To all the eminent people on the dais and to this very distinguished audience, let me at the outset say that I feel very humbled that I've been given this opportunity to pay my respects to a modern day Munishwara, a Guru, Sri Parameshwar. I've had the opportunity in the context of Sri Vivekananda Rock Memorial to have had some kind of a chance to listen to Sri Parameshwaranji. And equally, it gives me a lot of moral strength and courage by the sheer presence of the Ramakrishna Math Guruji here. I was telling him that I've had the blessing again when I was living in Hyderabad to have listened to have heard and have at his feet darshan of Swami Ranganathananda on the advice and suggestion of many. I have also had the benefit of reading many of his books. In particular, about women in India, his writings are so rich and I've benefited from that. I still fall back on his writings on many things to do with modern India. Sri O. Rajagopalanji is somebody I have looked up to, has had great presence, has singularly held the BJP's flag high and also opened the account for BJP in the assembly here. So I'm conscious that I'm standing on a dais where you have very eminent people seated. And equally I'm conscious that I shall be addressing an audience which since its birth, I would say, has had the tradition, intellectual tradition of Kerala being imparted along with its nurturing, its infancy. Each one of you all have had the advantage of that rich legacy which Kerala can be proud has given the basis for Indian intellectualism. So I'm conscious I'm standing in front of such a rich audience. Each one of you all have over the generations seen this great land upholding in a very increasingly challenging time. Each generation is fighting more and more challenges to what we think is our natural habitat, natural inheritance. Today it's becoming an issue for us to stand up and demand our space. And in that fight, Kerala's Bharatiya Vichara Kendra, the RSS, the BJP, and many such organizations are doing an unbelievable contribution where human lives are being sacrificed. An intellectual discourse for, like the way Sri Parameshwaranji had to do, was not easy for him, is not easy for any one of us, all the more. A country, in particular a state, which has had the tradition, now is fighting for its life in a way to keep that tradition alive, to keep that tradition of discourse alive, to keep the tradition of what is inherently natural to the people of Kerala and to the people of India. It sometimes tugs you at your heart to know and to understand is this is the kind of sacrifice you need to continue living in the way in which you've lived over the millennia. So it is in that context that we are meeting today, meeting and remembering somebody who valiantly, within the framework of discourse etiquette, kept moving forward and standing up to every challenge. There's so much we can learn from Sri Parameshwaranji today, even as we struggle to stand up for that intellectual space which we so need to protect. But the fault is not ours. It is becoming increasingly difficult because discourse is not anymore intellectual alone. It is now becoming physical. It is infused with a lot of physical and mental violence. And that is where discourses are becoming very, very fatigue-causing. Discourse, intellectual discourse, should be intellectually stimulating. You should come out of it feeling all the more energized and mentally stimulated. Of late, there's minimum space for it, but the space is ridden with a lot of mental, physical abuses. And that is where we are treading on very difficult grounds. So it is right, and it is in this time and in this background that we remember Sri Parameshwaranji. Now, without spending much more time on the Ranabhumi, as it were, I'll talk on the topic given to me, cooperative federalism, the path towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. A very contextually important topic. In today's India, we would think cooperative federalism is maturing and getting on to bring in greater sense of being together in this country, which has state assemblies, legislatures, which have also got their own respective elected governments, and a union government, which is called union government, because it is there with certain areas of, per the constitution, certain areas of activity delineated for it. The delineation between the state's responsibilities and the central responsibilities are there for everyone to see. But every now and then there are issues on which, more due to political considerations, the constitutional provisionalities are themselves being questioned. So it is in that context we are meeting and speaking about cooperative federalism. But we are speaking in a context where globally we are seeing very many challenges, not so much for India, but affecting India also. The challenges have been mounting, piling on, and the pandemic just brought it to the precipice. The pandemic pushed it to the topmost point of the hill, the mountain, that we feel that all of us are on the precipice. Only either you fall off or safely pull yourselves back. And that is not just for India. All countries, all multinational institutions, the global order, all of them are going through an immense phase of reset, immense phase of trying to find themselves in a newer fashion, newer design, newer language, newer articulation, and newer agenda. So we are talking about India, India's cooperative federalism, when the globe itself is in a state of flux. The challenges are immense for all of us together because the world is also going through this phase. And that is why when periodically all of us talk about what is this global order, has it actually helped countries like India? Has it actually helped the countries, the global south, as we would call it? Those countries which are still struggling to come up the development ladder. So in this kind of an atmosphere, for us to talk about cooperative federalism in the context of India itself is very, very important. Also because we mark the 75th year of India's independence, the Constitution has held up very well for India. Of course, periodically we do a lot of amendments, changes to suit the time in which we are living. And therefore, when we are marking the 75th year of independence and looking at moving India through an Amrit Kal, the next 25 years when we reach India at 2047, India at 100 years of independence, what would we want this country to be like? How would we want it to be like? And that will be for the younger generations to enjoy. And therefore, now the discussion that we are doing is more for understanding if the Amrit Kal is going to strengthen the Constitution, strengthen the federalism, the setup that we have, and above all, be a place where everyone is going to live with honor and dignity. And therefore, this discussion today is timely, appropriate, and it's not a discussion, I'm just speaking, and I'm sure the Bharatiya Vichar Kendra will be able to build on it, build on this idea, not essentially the idea that I'm putting across to you. I will, in the course of my talk, therefore, talk on 6 aspects of cooperative federalism as they stand today, and to say how Prime Minister Modi, because he has spent a long time in the state as an elected representative, holding a constitutional position, and at a time when this differences due to ideology were absolutely at the helm. Ideological differences had really reached a level that it was affecting the discourse even then. And Prime Minister, coming from the opposition party then, but as a Chief Minister, had also spoken about how cooperative federalism should strengthen this country. And therefore, 6 aspects which I will highlight on the topic for us to further talk about it, particularly at a time when we are looking forward to taking India in the next 25 years towards India at 100. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat announcement is my pivot. Atmanirbhar, we are still talking about it when India is at 75. Wasn't India Atmanirbhar before? That's not to say that India is going to claim the territory now, but if it is going to place emphasis on Atmanirbhar, given that the globe itself, even on the one hand, when we are saying global value chains, everybody will have to integrate with one another. You have to have raw materials, intermediary products coming to India. India should also produce and value add to a lot of commodities and be a part of the global value chain so that we export commodities. We are also able to integrate the requirement of skilled workers from the raw material to the final product and so on. So you're part of the global thirst to develop and provide good living standards for the world. So at this time, you want to be a part, both backward and forward, linking up with the globe, but you will have to think in terms of how far India can depend on itself, but yet be open to the world. And that is why talking about Atmanirbhar at this stage is very, very critical, because in the recent past, I'm not confining my example to 1 or 2, but there are several, I can quote 1 or 2. In the recent past, the advantages that India had in several areas were lost even as we opened up, or even as we remained closed prior to the opening up. And as a result, the natural advantage which our entrepreneurs brought to the economy were lost because of predatory pricing were lost because technology was getting saturated in India, and so on. So we need to have the center and states working together so that India as a whole can really move forward in each and every one of these areas. Sometimes I repeatedly quote this Panchatantra story that one bird alone couldn't have saved itself from the hunter's net, the net which brought a flock under it, a flock of birds which came pecking onto the grains on the ground. But when the hunter threw the net, the entire group was under the net and they didn't know how to get out of it. And how did they manage to get out of it? That's a very sharp lesson that is available for India, that all the birds took off at the same time and the net itself had to come out and the birds flew along with the net and there was no one bird left for the hunter to hunt. It is that spirit with which all the states together will have to work and move forward so that India can, as a flock, as a whole, develop. So in this kind of with this kind of an expectation, I want to just underline the fact, in the recent past, the COVID pandemic, repeatedly Prime Minister at his own level engaged with all the chief ministers of the state and ensured that whether it is sending the PPE kits to the hospitals or the doctors at the initial stages of COVID, or afterwards sending the vaccines, making sure the hospitals had all the oxygen-related equipments get to them. If one state had it, if another didn't, share it or pass it on if you have excess quantities. All this coordination, the Prime Minister himself sat with the state chief ministers more than 1 or 2 or 3 times as it went through the lockdown, as India went through the lockdown. So that in a pandemic time also, when center and state work together, we see India today with majority of the population covered by the vaccination, not 1 dose, not 2 doses, but also the 3rd dose which is given to people. Every corner of India, our frontline workers have gone. This is not going to happen just by the center making the vaccine available. It's also because the states realized that we have to work together for the interest of our people. So, that slogan of Prime Minister Modi in 2014, which very much speaks for the ideological background, Antyodaya. Antyodaya, which is Sri Deen Dayal Upadhyaya's code, primary code. Unless we serve the last man in the queue, you're not going to be able to lift all people out of the poverty and desperation in which many of them live. And that Antyodaya was reflected in Prime Minister Modi's slogan, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. There is no difference. I contrast it with the way in which one earlier Prime Minister said, the first charge on the Indian budget or treasury would be a particular community. Prime Minister Modi's development for all and being together with everybody who needs that development, Sabka Saath, we'll be together with everybody for the sake of the development of all, Sabka Vikas. So 2014 started with that. You had the financial inclusion. You used the Aadhaar to become a lot more sophisticated and a lot more scaled up. And then you also said an ordinary mobile phone is enough. You tell me where you are, we'll reach all the ration, we'll give you all the benefits that you need. And with that, it was possible to directly transfer that which has to be given to the poor or the needy of this country. More importantly, to respect the taxpayers' money, the tax amount which comes, every rupee has to have its full value respected. Unlike a situation where one former Prime Minister said, I send 1 rupee, only 15 paisa reaches the fellow who needs it. Using technology, Prime Minister ensured that everyone gets 1 rupee. If it is sent as 1 rupee will reach his account. That is the power of technology, which Prime Minister understood, that if you want to respect the taxpayers' money and not allow unfair, unworthy individuals to pilfer it away, the only way in which you can achieve it is achieve it by using technology and make it transparent. Anyone can see where it goes, who that individual is. Meaning not randomly anyone, but authorities who can see it. So this Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas was achieved and is continuing to be achieved with respect to the money which a taxpayer pays, with an expectation that development will reach down to the last person. And pilferage containing is one of the topmost priorities, I would think, for any responsible government. Now, by doing this, that Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas also acquired one more line which said Sabka Vishwas. Now, the attempt of this government, particularly in a federal setup, where the states do have governments which are elected by the people, maybe belonging to a different party other than from the center. So trust is what he underlined, I have in the people, and people will have to understand that I'm serving them transparently without corruption. And that doesn't differentiate between a state which is ruled by a non-BJP party or a BJP party ruled state is treated differently. All people of India will have to have trust by the government in them and them in us. That's the line Prime Minister always promotes, and therefore in this time, at a time when we're discussing about cooperative federalism, the attempt is first of all to win the trust of the common people. And in that, no state can have a difference. You can't say, Modi, you're wrong, because you're trying to say, I want the trust of the people in me, and therefore I'm doing this exercise openly. You can't say, Modi, you're doing this wrongly because the state government doesn't approve of this method. There's nothing in this to be disapproving of. And therefore the approach of Prime Minister Modi, having been a chief minister, is to win the trust of the person, not just by getting elected, but in everything that he does. The money you pay for tax is as worthy for me as the money in my own pocket. I have to utilize it to the maximum for the common good. So there's no way in which this money gets spent on anything else except for definitely a common cause. So in this, even as I move, the last one, the last of the slogan, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, is the Sabka Prayas. It cannot be that India will develop to reach a state of a developed country, which is what Prime Minister Modi spoke when he spoke from the Red Fort during our Independence Day speech 2022. It cannot be possible that we will reach a developed country status unless all states are going to be with us, meaning all states are going to work together for the common cause, unless all people also put their responsibility forward. That is why the approach of this government is to empower a citizen, give him his basic house, give him his toilet, give him his water, give him the opportunities that he needs. Let him be accessible to a bank, let him get small amount of loans to run his own business. And for that, let him not do attestations from the district collector, some government employee, somebody, and let him also not pledge that little gold his wife might have, or even if she doesn't have, search for somebody who can give him a guarantee. That is why most of the schemes like Mudra, Swalamban, all have government guarantee in it. The poor doesn't have to go searching for papers. And this is why Sabka Prayas is what is aimed at, through empowering him. Give him the advantages that he needs for basic living. And after that, he doesn't need anybody's help. He'll be able to access his own and decide how he wants to lead his life and his family. So empowerment versus entitlement. When you do this empowerment versus entitlement, you know that there is no way in which just one section or repeatedly the same section or repeatedly the same set of families would say, I've always had it for 50 years, you give it to me even now, whether I deserve it or not. No longer the case. Now the case is, if in a street there are 10 families which are entitled for something, they will get it. There we don't see whether he's my guy, or is he wearing a red uniform, or is he wearing this, or is he doing that. None of that. He's an Indian citizen. He will get it. He will get it because he's entitled to have it, because he should be empowered. And after that, there's no more claims there. Therefore, I want to show how in Atmanirbhar there are 3 C's which govern the government policy. And therefore, the 3 C's also govern the center-state relationship. Now, if the 3 C's govern the center and state's relationship, it's the same approach towards a citizen, and therefore the states, all of us together, like the flock of birds. Cooperation, collaboration, and coordination. Unless states cooperate, not just with the center, but even within themselves, among themselves, between themselves, whether it is river water, whether it is excess dam capacity, whether it's a link road, whether this port versus that port, there is no such competition which should deny some state and build on some other. So cooperation. Now PM Gati Shakti is something where the synergy is what is being played upon. There is one dam or there is one industrial estate, but to that industrial estate no settlements or cities are connected. There is some MP who wants a railway station is given, but the railway station serves no purpose for the industry, for the exporter, for the raw material supplier or the farmer. But the railway station is there because there is some MP who is powerful enough to get it. But the exporter, the farmer, the industrial unit which is coming, all of which need a connection, now says, look, we are all isolated. Where do we get this going? Give us some allowance for it. That railway station was with government fund, with taxpayers' money. The PM Gati Shakti, therefore, looks at resources which have been spent for creating assets which can strengthen India, and tries to link it with the neighborhood, be it a settlement of farmers, a village, a set of villages, or to a neighborhood which has a port, through the port where exports happen, and therefore money spent earlier, monies which will be spent in the future, will all go through this PM Gati Shakti route, where you're saying, will it serve more than one cause? Multimodal. Will it benefit this state as much as that port, as much as this farmer? That vetting happens so that national resources can be used to benefit more than one cause at a time, one state at a time, more than one objective of the economy, export or domestic consumption at a time. Also optimally utilize rare and renewable energy such as electricity and so on. So the national priorities will have to be seen through these 3 C's: cooperation, collaboration, and to coordinate among the states. This principle of governance, it sounds like, some corporate sector executive which says, no, this is how we have to do because the efficiency matters for our company. Why can't it be governance for a country? We need that so that states understand, center works together, and national priorities will have to be set and addressed. Now, the second of the aspects that I said, which I highlight here, is economy in the cooperative federalism. In today's India's context, everywhere, all of us are conscious that many things that we can produce, which we need, which are final consumption products, furniture, electrical fittings, even these are getting imported in a huge number. Prime Minister used to quote the example of agarbattis, which each one of us used in our daily prayers every day in the temples, in Buddhist monasteries. Agarbattis are used. But we imported agarbattis. Some were manufactured in Bengaluru and places like that. But why should we? Is it a huge such technology which we don't know anything about? And therefore, that example of agarbatti became also the point which started being asked for other areas also. Can Saranpur, can furniture makers elsewhere in the country not supply us? Why do we need a wooden chair to come from elsewhere? If it is just cost, can we not support the Indian manufacturer in such a way that cost competitiveness is brought in? So the economy also, in a globalized world, must understand the vulnerabilities it faces. And states and center will have to work together, and that is why the scheme of one district, one product was brought in. Your state, your district, you tell us which product which is good enough. One, rest of India gets to know about it and buys it. Two, with good lot of funding given to them for common facility, packaging, exporting, finding the markets elsewhere, using our embassies and high commissions, we should be able to market that district product even abroad other than selling for India's own markets. Now for this, the technology again, e-markets, networking with buyers outside, all this is being facilitated. And this development will benefit every state. And here, many of us, for instance, forget the fact that India's size and some states' size are larger than some countries abroad. Some of our states are bigger than some of the European Union members. The products are worth getting scaled up and for exports. So when investors meet happen in different states, and states try to ramp up their production capacities, highlight some of these to the investors, there is a healthy competition between states. And that is one of the ways in which center also works together with the states to find out what is it that the center has to do to make that state all the more investment friendly. More than 1,500 laws which were decadent and archaic, which existed on the files. And because it existed on the files but served no purpose in the ground, there were some unscrupulous, not all of them, but some unscrupulous officers who would quote that and say, hey, your business doesn't comply with that, what do you want to do? And benefit something for himself rather than think about the business or the country. So it became a powerful weapon for rent-seeking officers, some of whom were unscrupulous, and made businesses very, very difficult. For that sake, the union government made sure that 1,500 laws were all removed. There were some more to happen, and that process keeps continuing. We want to trust the citizen and give him the right to run his business without the fear of such unscrupulous people, and therefore the trust element builds again on it. So the competitive federalism there is something which is positive, brings in fair competition between states, and in that the center is with all the states. So the goal of developed India cannot actually be achieved unless many reforms are taken up. Imagine if the GST wasn't brought out. If the GST law hadn't passed, even today businesses will have to, at every stage, entering into a state, you will have to pay octroi. Entering into the state, for the same commodity, you will pay another tax. Layer of taxation, one layer over the other layer over another. So the multiplicity of taxation and therefore paying the same item over 3 times all made India very inefficient a market. Today, because of that, you're able to see the ease of businesses. All India, the price of a commodity is the same. Taxation, you know. I know the number of days or years when Delhi, because it had lesser taxation, many from the South India, various states, used to go to Delhi to buy their Maruti car because the tax was less. And they would pay a driver to drive it down all the way to the state in which they lived and save somewhere 20,000 to 25,000 rupees. Today, that's not the problem. GST has come in, all items cost the same, all over the country. You pay the same tax as much as any other citizen anywhere else in the country pays. So you, therefore, will have to constantly remind ourselves, states and center will have to remind ourselves as to how to make the state or the country at par for everybody. Every citizen of India should be having the same treatment wherever he is. So GST is one of the very important examples. I go back to it. The council, the establishment of the council, which has every finance minister from every state. In independent India's history, 1947 onwards, GST Council is a classic example of an institution which, with all states cooperating and center working together, have made a big difference to India. It's probably the only institution post-1947 which speaks for good center-state federalism as an institution. Of course, there are people who still badmouth it, who still see it is all Modi's work in the council, who are negating themselves, saying, I'm a member of the council, but everything is decided by Modi. Prime Minister Modi doesn't even sit in the GST council. But the actual advantage of a council like that, which is a center state, federal structure, which shows the light on how good governance can work to the benefit of the common people. Every state has a voice there. Every state speaks. This reform was lying for decades together in the conceptual stage, and then somewhat moved, then again it lied for want of thoughts. The impetus given by Prime Minister Modi is after he took over in 2014, and it has benefited. And here it was not just the BJP finance ministers. In fact, much before the GST Council was taking the final shape at that time, it was CPM's Asim Das Gupta who was heading that empowered committee, in which you had all kinds of parties and their finance ministers. It was never headed by a ruling party finance minister. So the structure which has been given to the GST Council is very much after all parties over months together discussed, and it is working today. And look at the way it worked during the pandemic. No state was allowed to wonder where its money is going to come because the economy is locked down. So this is a classic example of how when center and states work together, it actually works for the benefit of the people. One other institution is the Finance Commission, which actually every 5 years, every 10 years goes to the states, talks, understands what is got to be done for the next 5 years, takes every state's viewpoint and does the maximum for all interests of all states. It's a constitutional body. It's constituted as per what Parliament has been authorized to look at the Finance Commission and its formulations. The report is submitted to the President of India and then gets tabled also in the Parliament. So, Prime Minister Modi's time, I'm purposely going back every now and then to talk about this government and the federal, cooperative federalism, because much voice is being raised outside. In 2014-15, when the 14th Finance Commission submitted its report, and all finance commissions talk about the money collected as tax and its devolution. How much should a state get from it? How much should center get? The 14th Finance Commission submitted a report in 2015 and said what was till then being given, which is 32% of all tax collected should be given to the states, was changed to 42% all at one go. Meaning, till then, if out of every 100 rupees that was collected from tax, 32 rupees had to go to the states. That Finance Commission said, now you raise it to 42%, which means the center will have lesser amount in its hand. Prime Minister Modi, without a second thought about it, fully accepted that Finance Commission, and that is why today states get 42% of the amount, now reduced by 41% because J&K is no longer a state. It will soon become maybe sometime. So that element of 1% was brought down in the next Finance Commission, but 32% became 42% in that 14th Finance Commission's recommendation, and Prime Minister Modi, having been a chief minister of a state, knew what it would mean to the states to get a little more money, agreed to it, and that Finance Commission recommendation was implemented and it gets implemented even now. The next Finance Commission has come in, submitted its report as well, and that is implemented. So not only that the quantum of money which goes to the state is much higher, in spite of all the contrary views that you may hear outside, there is no way in which 41%, or the earlier 42, now 41, can be reduced. There is a misconception which is getting built. Oh no, this 41% you will give, but the quantum being collected as tax is whatever it is, but center collects more in the name of cesses, and cesses are never distributed to the states, and therefore you're taking away more tax capacity that exists in the common, citizens. In the name of cess, you're taking it and taking it for yourself. And that money taken for yourself never reaches the states, is the allegation. And that allegation obviously vitiates the center-state relationship. But that allegation, as I said in the Parliament more than once, that allegation is completely unfounded. It has no basis. Because even if you assume centers collects cess, education cess, health cess, infrastructure cess, the money it collects in the name of the cess is not kept for itself. Center has no terrain, if you know what I mean. The land area where the projects will have to happen are all with the states. Center doesn't have anything except for the union territories, a few of them here and there, where that money can be spent. If you suspect that it is being spent by the center for itself, it is only the few union territories. But when you collect money in the name of infrastructure cess, roads are everywhere. Roads are getting built everywhere. Ports are getting built everywhere. No one state is denied highways. No one state is denied major ports. Minor ports are with the states themselves. So even the cess will have to go to the states. So, but no, when we want to vitiate for political reasons and considerations, that center-state relationship is getting vitiated, you base it on this false narrative, baseless argument, statistically disproven argument, saying cess money is going to the center. No, it doesn't. It goes via the center to the states in the form of better schools, better teachers, better roads, better ports. And therefore, center-state relationship getting infused by arguments which are repeatedly getting disproved by data still allows that aroma, like a good coffee. You taste it, you know it's a good coffee, there's sugar in it, there's milk in it, there's coffee in it, and it's got good temperature, it is hot enough to drink, but still the aroma lingers. You prove that the cess has gone to the states, road, this much each state, data by state, but still we'll keep saying the aroma is. That vitiates the relationship, center-state. And media, I'm glad to see quite a good presence of media here, often gives the space to say no, but in the parliament this has been explained. In the parliament, this has been shown with answers to the honorable members who ask questions on it. How much has Kerala received in terms of roads? Data is there. Money has not come in the GST compensation cess to us. Data is there. Parliament questions show the data. RTI gives the data. Media also takes these information and puts it out. But I'm sorry, there are some who would still do politics with it. So center-state relationship, unfortunately, periodically gets targeted because of political consideration, not factual considerations. I can go on to talk about Niti Aayog, which has come in the place of the Planning Commission. It no longer works like a body which dispenses money at the pleasure of every state chief minister coming and bowing before it. There's no bowing required now under Prime Minister Modi. Every state gets the money in due time. And let me say, with a certain sense of authority and responsibility, during the pandemic and immediately after that, and in the year 2021 and 2022, wherever we had the comfort of some more revenue coming in, I have paid even one extra installment much ahead of the time so that states don't run short of money. In November of 21, February of 22, extra installments were given. An installment which has to be paid next month or the month ending in March have also advance been sent off saying, you please take the money. You should have the money in your hand. So data can prove it. The other aspect which I'd like to speak about, which is very much in the current debate today, everybody speaks about it, is the fiscal soundness of states. And for an Atmanirbhar Bharat, the fiscal strength, the soundness is a very critical component. There are new sources of risks which every state is facing. The temptation to spend on non-merit goods. You create an asset. You want a school building, you want a bridge, you want to have a water tank in a village, you want to have a pipeline coming. All this is very necessary. But if you start expanding on contingent liabilities, which will be there for every government afterwards to keep paying it, whereas when you create an asset, it generates revenue not just immediately, but for 10, 20, 15 years. So the temptation of getting into such not so viable non-merit expenditure is very high in some states. And these overdues, you take a loan, not spend it on building an asset, but spend it on something today. You want to give something away freely to everybody with borrowed money. It is an intergenerational burden you are creating. For attending to today, you are burdening the coming generations. Fiscal health of the state gets affected. And by constitution, because it provides a certain article which says, Article 293, which says center can discuss and raise these questions, then it becomes an issue. Oh no, center state, how are you asking me? I am the government here, I can spend on whatever I want, it's none of your business. And I'll borrow endlessly for it, beyond my capacity and means. It certainly becomes a matter of concern for all of us. The DISCOM dues, the distribution companies on electricity, the dues which many states have, dues which have not been paid, is a case in point, and I wouldn't take much of your time to elaborate on that. We all know it. And also, constantly it is important to understand the share of revenue expenditure versus the capital expenditure. If your capital expenditure goes up, you know, in the budget, this budget and the previous budget, we have increased by about 34% last year, and again about 35% this year, the expenditure on capital goods or constructions. Build infrastructure. We are with you. 5.5 last year, lakh crores, 7 point something this time, lakh crores. And in that 7 point something, 1 full lakh goes to the states as interest-free 50-year amount so that you build something, create jobs, create assets. Now, center wants to give you. There were states which initially said, no, we don't want this money because you'll start monitoring us. Monitoring we do anyway. If you want a World Bank assistance, you'll have to get it from the center, through the center as a back-to-back loan for some project in your state. That is monitored by the state center. So, vitiating a narrative, saying if I take this budgetary provision for 50 years interest-free to build dams or build roads or build some schools in my state, I will get monitored by the center. I don't want that monitoring by the is center, Pakistan? Vitiating this atmosphere. It is given at a time when you spend on capital expenditure, jobs can be created, the multiplier effect will be more, the virtuous cycle will set roll, and the revival of the economy will be quicker. No, but this is how we want to politicize center-state relationship, that if center gives money to the states, they come under the monitoring ring or the radar of the center, so we should not take it. Look at the element of toxicity in this argument. Will India have come this far if every state said, no, center, don't give me money in the last 50, 60 years? So this approach to dealing with center-state relationship of toxic arguments, even for legitimate activity, vitiates the atmosphere for center and state. So help for state finances, I've indicated to you in somewhat. And again, one other issue, which probably brings me to the last but one point, is administration and cooperative federalism. The very administrative services, Indian Administrative Service, Indian Police Service, Indian Economic Service, they've all been created from people from all the states. They bring in the cultural diversity, they represent all states, they govern the country at a national level, they also work in the districts as district collectors and officers in the district. They bring the ground flavor to the center's administrative overall experience back to the states, so that give and take of a centrally recruited pool of officers for administrative service, police, economic service, and so on, revenue service, is beautifully designed to help this country with one another's, that cross-pollination which happens, the experience sharing that happens. Today what you see is, unfortunately, some states saying, no, we shall not send our officers to the center. It doesn't, in the short term, it might hurt one another, or it might hurt the center because you're not sending. In the long term, your state itself, you're meaning any state, itself will lose that administrative experience and the sharing of experience and the advantage because of it, because you've become looking inwards. And after all, the nature of these services and the cadre controlling authorities all will have to benefit from one another's experiences. That has also become of late a contention between the center and state, which need not be. We need not politicize the bureaucracy to settle a political score. In June 2022, a Chief Secretary's conference was held in Dharamshala. A lot of things were discussed. Niti Aayog was also there as to how states and their finances also were reviewed. A lot of lessons were learned from it. It benefits to have that exchange of ideas, and it gives a whole of government approach. Now, the last aspect of center-state relationship. I said 6 aspects. This is the 6th, which I want to draw your attention to. When global events take place, every state gets a chance to showcase itself for everything that it has. Just iconic centers, tourism spots, just not that. The culture of the state, the hospitality of the states, the great achievements of the states, the soft achievements, the tangible, solid achievements can all be marketed. G20, India is going to take up the presidency from 1st December. It's also the year when the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, SCO, India will be taking over. It's a great opportunity for India to showcase India in its varied states and administrations. Prime Minister insisted that meetings should be held in every state. One or the other meeting should be held in every state, because deputies meet, secretaries meet, ministers meet, and then the summit happens with the Prime Minister or the presidents coming from all over the world. 20 top countries of the world will come to India during this phase. Repeatedly, Prime Minister's wish has been that at least one of these meetings, if possible 2 meetings, should happen in each one of our states. Not just me, every one of us appeal to the states saying, use this opportunity to showcase the states. Whatever you would want to showcase. You are at once getting a captive 20 top nations, ministers, officers, all coming to your states. Is this not a very powerful way of strengthening center and state cooperation? So, with these, I think I've broadly indicated aspects of center-state relationship where there are points of friction, but there are also immense points of cooperation. It doesn't always end up in shouting and closing sine die the parliament, the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. There are immense lot of positive contribution which the states are making towards the national narrative. It is important time in the history of the world, history of India, a time when the global, as I said at the beginning, turbulations, reset is happening. Reset should also happen in India. Understanding how cooperation can benefit us, good, fair competition among states will benefit us, And collaborations also help us, the 3 C's that I spoke about. And therefore, ideologically too, the repeated taunting in some states, which while talking about Parameshwaranji has been repeatedly said, not just in Kerala. Taunting of certain things, talk Vande Matram, no, it's objectionable. What is objectionable about it? National anthem, objectionable. This is a time for us to stand together as a country, identify ourselves with symbols of our country, speak about how this country is a Vishwaguru in many digital payments revolution, Aadhaar-based DBT, vaccine, the co-win, the web which showed, the platform which gave us the digital certificate for the vaccinations that we took, while countries were only giving papers, advanced countries were giving only paper vaccination certificates. India's achievements in the digital arena, the success of our fintechs, more than 100 unicorns, are the envy of the world. People are asking us, how do you manage to scale it up in India? They are probably 1/10 of our size, they are not able to achieve it. And they're looking to India saying, would you not share it with us? And at a time like this, it's important for all of us, states, center, municipalities, panchayats, each one understand and be proud of the heritage. 75 years of independence, every week, one or the other freedom fighter's story who's been less known has been taken up and promoted in a big way by the Prime Minister. We need to recognize every hero of this country. Known, unknown, sung, unsung, all of them will have to be brought to the light. Look at the way Indian youth responded for the Tiranga, Ghar Ghar Tiranga. Everyone knows India's flag. Everybody knows what is tricolor. But that utsaha, but that enthusiasm with which people came about. Citizens are proud. Sometimes I just wonder if politics unnecessarily plays out too much in our lives, that this great country sometimes becomes less in self-confidence. We should not allow this moment in the history of the world, history of our country, to make us suffer for something which we don't deserve. We need our confidence intact. We need the pride that we belong to this country, which has withstood several turbulations. But today we are standing high, and that one example gives me the feeling of a sweet revenge, which I'll share with you. Couple of years ago, 6-7 years, probably just 10 years ago, India was in the 12th position or 11th position in the global economy and its size. And who was in the 5th position at that time? United Kingdom. Today, even as I recall with some element of bitterness in me, Sir Winston Churchill, who said, oh, Indians will really suffer, they will probably be not knowing how to govern, the country is going to, struggle in poverty if you leave them. But today, after 75 years of independence, we have reached the 5th position, thanks to the people of India. Thanks to the people of India. And I don't want to say the 5th position has gone down. The earlier holder of the 5th position has gone down. It is possible for India if all together, like the flock of birds, we don't bicker on our differences, but rise together, capture this moment. Think of Bharat Mata, the service that we all owe to her. Take this country forward, and the Panch Pran, which was said by Prime Minister during the Independence Day speech, just throw away, cast away the legacy of the colonial rule. We don't need to remember any of that. Well, I'm speaking in English, but I'm sorry, we don't need to remember any of that. But remember the inheritance, the legacy, the proud legacy that we had. It's been a country of saints who gave up great living for many things and lived for the benefit of the people. We need the next 25 years in the memory of such things and build, and that is where Sabka Prayas, you, me, everyone will have to try to build and take this country forward to where it was once, the world's richest, largest economy during Krishna Deva Raya's time. That's where we need to be. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I pay my respects to Shri Parameshwaranji, and thank you Bharat Vichar Kendra for this good opportunity to discuss some of the critical issues. Thank you very much.